So my name's Ian Hingley. I work for a company called Urban Movement. In about 2014, we were commissioned by Glasgow City Council following an open OG tender, I think, to work on this project called Sauchiehall Street Avenue. And the scheme finished in about 2019-20, and we submitted it this year for the Urban Design Group Award under the People Friendly Places category. So I'm just going to rattle through this project really in the next 15 minutes to give you a flavour of what we were trying to do and try and focus it on, decarbonising transport really and issues that creates in terms of climate change. Just to give you a bit of context, this is Glasgow City Centre looking north. The pink line is a part of Sauchiehall Street we redesigned. Sauchiehall Street continues west towards Kelvin Grove Art Gallery, and it connects with Buchanan Street precinct, which is in the city centre. So it's it's an important link between the residential West End and the commercial leisure centre of Glasgow City Centre itself. Now, again, back still in pink at the top left-hand corner, these are the rest of the avenues, some of which I'm doing, or we're doing, and then other consultants are dealing with some of the others. So eventually there'll be a kind of connected network of what we're referring to of kind of green active travel streets that will, help with this issue of decarbonising transport in Glasgow City Centre. And what we mean by active travel streets is they're good for walking, they're good for cycling, you can access public transport. And what we mean by green is there's lots of big trees on them. And there's no rain gardens on Sauchiehall Street for a couple of reasons, which I'll explain. But the rest of the avenues will all be fully equipped with rain gardens to deal with most of the surface water that falls on the street. And the other key concept really was to turn these streets from streets into public spaces. This started as an idea with community consultations based around the Glasgow transport strategy and the various regeneration strategies in the city centre. So it kind of came out of public consultation, but we developed it further through the concept and detailed design stage, and the city council ended up building it and controlling the contract. So it was a bit of it's fair to say it was it's not, when I say my project, it's not my project at all. It's a kind of, there's a lot of collaboration there. Now we started with this essentially, which is, I call it the 20th century street, because this is what our streets were like at the end of the last century, and hopefully during this century they'll get changed a bit. So as you can see, there are essentially 4 traffic lanes through Sauchiehall Street. Sauchiehall Street's one way moving east, so we're looking towards the city centre. To get all this traffic in, supposedly, the footways were made as narrow as possible, but then they also had to host trade waste bins, which you can see on the left-hand side particularly. And the idea, we simply got rid of those actually by enforcing a local bylaw that had been in existence for a long time, but the council had never realised they had this power. So they went along and made all the local businesses store their waste inside rather than on the street. So we solved the problem without doing anything with that one particularly. And the scheme was really about more equitably distributing the space. So before we had 4 lanes for traffic, we cut it down to 2. Now, so those 2 spare lanes, we moved one, we turned one into a cycle track, if you like, and then one into this multifunctional verge, which hosted all the trees and the seats and the cycle park and all the other bits of street furniture. So we gained what we lost from, glasses have come off. What we lost from traffic, essentially, we regained as public space. And that was a key idea, really, was to create, not just to focus on transport, but to make these streets genuine public spaces. It is absurdly simple, as you can see now. We planted the trees down the middle because that's where there were the least utilities. So that's where there were the least conflicts. And the only real chance we had of actually planting these trees. And they're the first trees on Sauchiehall Street. I think the last one came out. They cut the last one down around the turn of the last century. And you can see quite clearly, we took one traffic lane, made it into a cycle track. The other traffic lane became your public space, essentially, with the trees and the seats. And one thing that struck me early on was that there was a lot of space given over to traffic, but there was no traffic. This has taken about 11 o'clock, probably in the morning. And as you can see, there's a few parked cars and one or two taxis up the other end of the street, but the rest of it is just dead space. It's wasted space. So that was our argument. And we had traffic. There's a traffic model done to the city centre, and they plugged our scheme into the traffic model, and it proved that it was going to have absolutely no impact whatsoever on traffic congestion or traffic movement through the centre. So it gave us a mandate really to really dig up most of this tarmac and do something else. As I say, the project is focused on active travel. Obviously, active travel is, well, as close to carbon neutral, I guess, as you can get in terms of moving around. You still need food to eat, I guess. But the three of them are illustrated there: your pedestrians, your cyclists, and your bus users. So that was the kind of the three transport elements of the project. To make walking work better, we had to connect up the footways on both sides of the road. The footways were dissected by side roads, so pedestrians have to step down, walk across the road, and step back up again. Very often there weren't any drop curbs. There was no tactile paving. So what we did is to simply pave them over, so that the footpath network was continuous, and the driving network or the road network was discontinuous. It's a very simple approach, but it suddenly shifts the priority between the pedestrian and the motorist. And it's interesting because, you know, it seems to work. It seems to work for everyone. It makes the street much more accessible for everyone. Not just if you're just, you know, an able-bodied person walking around, but if you're also in a wheelchair or you have visual problems as well. Because the continuity, the visual continuity of the footways and across the side road is there. You get a clear sense of where you've got to go, even if you're, you know, visually impaired. And then a key decision I made as well was to make sure that the cycle track was at the same level as the verge and the footway. So you create a step-free environment. It's separated by a raised profile curb, which you can pick up with a stick if you're visually impaired. But also, if you're in a wheelchair, you can bump straight over it and get to the curbside where you can get in a taxi and go somewhere else. So that was quite a fundamental detail that we used on this scheme. Again, it's been used pretty well in a sense by all generations. So you have kids going to school in the morning, you have people hanging around during the day. I think Robert spotted a few homes, people sitting on the seats and, you know, enjoying the sunshine. So it is a very inclusive street. I mean, in a sense, it always was, but it allows, what we did is allow people to occupy that street a little bit more easily. And again, providing access to good transport, to public transport, and giving them good facilities, such as the new bus shelters, real-time information, is going to make people, you know, walk to the bus and get on the bus rather than get in a car. And again, the detail we opted for here was a bidirectional cycle track. So that's it's 3 meters wide. But what it means is, because the flows are quite tidal, you know, in the morning people are cycling from the west end to the town, and in the evenings they're cycling the other direction. Generally, it means you have essentially more room for moving in both directions, rather than having two smaller cycle tracks on each side of the road. And it just means that you're not so crowded when you're cycling. It allows other things to happen in the cycle lane as well, such as this little kid's learning to cycle. And it's obviously used by, you know, the idea is it's used by different types of cyclists. So we've got commuters, we've got leisure cyclists who are just pottering around town, enjoying the sunshine. And then we'll move on to the trees. I mean, the trees are fundamentally changing the character of the street. Without them, they roughly cost, if you include all the underground infrastructure, around £35,000 each. Now, it sounds a lot of money, but there was 5 years maintenance built into that as well. So you got these amazing instant effect assets on that street, which you wouldn't have got by planting, you know, extra heavy standards. These are all semi-mature trees. So it's well worth the investment in the tree stock itself, because you get dramatic change, which no other component can bring about. And they go along the lines of, you know, you've got shade in the summer, and they provide shelter. They help to break down the wind problems with the corridor effects and things like that. And they, you know, obviously trees give out oxygen taking carbon dioxide, which is sometimes overlooked or forgotten about. And they provide some spatial definition. So you have on the left, on the right hand side, you've got the public space, if you like, and on the left hand side, you've got the transport corridor, the road corridor, where the cars park and load, and also drive up and down. So they're useful in that sense as well. And again, without them, I feel that the public space side of it would kind of be diluted. And they have the effect, obviously, cleaning air as well. So when you're around the trees and underneath the trees, there's a greater sense of cleanliness, I think, in terms of the quality of the air that you're breathing. And they help. There are studies around absorbing various types of pollutant, and also blocking pollutants from traveling around too far. But in a sense, that's the kind of lowest win, I think, of all, and the least noticeable, I think, as well. But it's still an important gain that the trees give us. We also use the tree pits to manage surface water. As I said at the beginning, we were originally going to have rain gardens, but for a couple of technical reasons we couldn't do it. Mainly because the trees are in the middle of the old road, which is the high point of the camber, so the water's not flowing in that direction for starters. So we ended up just doing permeable paving, so the water that fell on the actual verge itself seeps down into the root zone. But it wasn't as overt a sort of drainage measure as it would be with rain gardens. But we are developing rain gardens for the next phases. So the street, it's also become a sort of a little playground, and there's no overt play elements in this street at all. It's something I was trying to do, but couldn't really find any room for them. What you tend to find is kids play in this space anyway, because it's a space for everyone. And I don't really think kids like to be tucked away in a corner in a playground particularly. I think they like to be out in the street with everyone else joining in. So you do get kids, learning to cycle. You get kids on their scooters. You get kids climbing on the tree frames as well, and climbing on the seats. So it's already a playground in a sense. The street already is a playground without any play facilities. And I think before we did this project, there were no seats at all on Sauchiehall Street. I've got a picture somewhere of a woman who used to come out every day at lunchtime and sit in a bush shelter and eat her lunch because there was nowhere to sit. And I used that as the argument. And in a sense, I did have to argue as well, because people say, who wants to come sit on Sauchiehall Street? Because their argument was, there's no one there because there's no seats. So we put in over 30 seats, which is probably space for about 90 people. And in a way, we could probably squeeze a few more in as well if we tried hard enough. But that's the only way people can occupy public space is to sit down in it. You can walk through it, but if you want to stay in it, you have to sit down. There's no real alternative, and you can only do that on seats, or steps maybe. And it becomes a place where you can meet a friend and have a chat about something easily enough. Or as this old couple were doing here, they were just having a rest. I mean, that's like something that gets forgotten about. People need places to rest because, when you're old or have mobility issues, then, every sort of 30 or 40 meters, you're going to need a rest. And the seats opposite in front of the pink shop, you have to pay to sit there. But obviously, the seats we provided are free. And then that had the next effect of creating this public space, and it works on both sides of the street actually, because the footway on the other side was widened. It just didn't get the benefit of all the trees. You've got more space for kind of outdoor eating and outdoor drinking, because Sauchiehall Street was and always has been a sort of a leisure street or destination street in the evening. So there's a few nightclubs, there's gig venues, there's lots of bars, restaurants. So the whole place really comes to life at night. Strangely enough, probably more than in the daytime, but the daytime, whereas before it wasn't really happening, now it's quite a bustling little bustling part of the city centre. And I think I just want to sum up now because I'm running out of time. These are the kind of 5 key elements of a project, or I think any project really, if you're going to take a public realm scheme forward, is to get public support and engagement, whether it's as involved as sort of co-design, or whether it's just keeping people up to date with what's happening or what you're thinking about. doesn't necessarily matter, but as long as that's there at the beginning, you need to do detailed and intrusive surveys. By intrusive, I mean digging holes. If you want to plant a tree somewhere, you've got to dig a hole to find out if it can go in that space. You can do all the CAT scans and radar surveys beforehand to make sure, or at least give yourself a chance there's no utilities there. You also need to dig a hole to find out. You'll not know until you dig that hole. And the other thing, you need skilled and experienced designers. I think a lot of, I'm a landscape architect. Equally, it could have been done by an architect or an engineer, or an urban planner, urban designer. But so as long as the people have got the skills and the experience, they can redesign the streets and the public realm. But you do have to sort of know a little bit about everything. And it's key to get council officer and council elected politicians and stakeholders involved in the project and behind the project. If they're not interested in it or don't care, it's not going to happen. So getting those three components to collaborate with through all stages of the project, but also to get behind it, is absolutely fundamental. And then, of course, money. The money for this scheme, for the whole Avenues programme, was over £100 million. It was raised through the City Deal programme, which Derek Dunsire at Council secured for Glasgow City Council. So he did an amazing job in getting all this money. And we spent about 6 million of it on this street. But that included 5 years of maintenance. So all those trees are going to be maintained by Ida Verdi, who built the scheme, for the next 5 years, by which time the council is sort of in the process of developing a team to deal with street trees, because you don't really have that many street trees. But when we finish this Avenues programme, there's going to be a lot. There's also going to be a lot of rain gardens. So they're developing the skills in-house to maintain the trees and maintain the rain gardens. And that is the end. There's just some credits.